Hey, it's Joe, it's week 20, and the topic this week is food. It's a non-trans week, and the topic is food. I'm just gonna disclaimer here, I had an exam earlier, and one of my exams, I tend to do this a lot, and especially if the exam is bad, not going well for me, I do an awful lot of this. So that's why my hair looks ridiculous. And I sat here trying to fix it a little bit before I started recording, and there's just nothing to be done here. So there's your sort of just warning, disclaimer about that. That's why that's happening today. Worse than usual. Alright, so the topic is food, and yeah, these topics are fun. But I realised before I started recording there's actually a way I can make this sort of vaguely transy. For a start, I have stories to tell about my first couple of weeks on tea, where my hunger was ridiculous. Personally, and also I can talk about, I suppose, how food and me go in terms of my identity, because my relationship to food has been quite dictated by my relationship to my gender identity for quite a long time. So I'm gonna make this vaguely transy and not just talk about food. But I mean, you know, talking about food is also fun, so what else? Food is great. Don't you love food? Anyway, so these days, yeah, I do love food. That's changed an awful lot since I started tea. I was for the past 3 years, my relationship with food has been really bad, basically. And that was one of my, as I've mentioned before, that was one of my sort of indicators that I needed to address my gender identity, was that I was losing a lot of weight. I mean, it's a fairly simple sort of equation. I knew that the skinnier I was, the smaller my boobs were, the smaller my hips were, the less feminine I looked, basically. I mean, the kind of genetics that I have, being half Irish, that doesn't always, anyway, the kind of genetics that I have, the minute I put on weight, it goes directly to my chest and my hips, and I have a proper hourglassy type figure, and I have really large boobs at my sort of heaviest, which wasn't heavy, but just bigger than I am now. So, as I sort of became less and less comfortable with my body, I basically, oops, muted Joni Mitchell, that's not what I did. As I became less and less comfortable with my body, I basically ate less and less, and I'm probably going to trigger warning this video for eating disorder-y type behaviour, basically. I don't think I could have necessarily been diagnosed with an eating disorder, and if I had, it would have been, what's that called? EDNOS? Ednos? Anyway, because it didn't fall into sort of categories of anorexia or bulimia, but I certainly did not have a healthy relationship with food at all. I would go a long time without eating. I became very good at ignoring hunger pains, and it's just not good. God, this has become so intense. It was supposed to be a light, non-transy video. But anyway, so this is my relationship with food. So it was bad. It wasn't very good, and I did sort of end up I missed a period or two because I was very overweight. Anyway, but that ended up being the trigger for me being I'm really not healthy, I need to address why this is happening, and I knew why it was happening, so yeah. So that's what my relationship with food was like. Then, once I became aware of it and addressed it, I started to get gradually a little bit better, and making myself eat and stuff, making sure I paid attention to, not my calorie intake, but seeing food as fuel was really helpful to me, and being well, I have shit I need to do, and food is the thing that gives me the energy to do that, and makes me not grouchy and tired. So I got a little bit better gradually once I'd sort of acknowledged the fact that this is where it was coming from. But then I started tea, and then everything changed. Oh my god. I feel like I've had a food rebirth. And I don't want to make it sound like this is the kind of thing that's going to happen for anybody. Like, if you have a bad relationship with food, you're going to start to eat it, it's all going to be solved. Like, I talked about it as well, I kind of addressed it, you know, etc. But starting tea was kind of really quite, it was another thing that helped an awful lot, in that I suddenly, not only was I more hungry, but it was like every time I was hungry and every time I ate, it was that kind of, you know, when like you're really, really hungry, and like you've been being really like active, like you've been like skiing for the day or something, and you're like super hungry, and you're hungry for something really specific, like you're really hungry. Usually for me it's like roast potatoes and broccoli and stuff and gravy. When you're that hungry for that something that specific, and then you get to actually eat the specific thing that you're really in the mood for, best feeling in the whole world. My first week on tea, every single meal felt like that. But the problem was, because I'd been under-eating for such a long time, my stomach was like tiny, so I had this horrible experience of like I'd be so hungry, and then I'd eat as much as I could, but I'd start to feel sick before I started to feel full, because my stomach was so little. Horrible. So it was horrible for a while, and then the hunger died down a little bit, and my stomach stretched a little bit, so now I still have a bigger appetite than I did, and I'm able to eat more than I used to be able to, but it's not quite as overwhelming as it was the first week on tea. First week on tea was fucking ridiculous. I ate 5 hash browns in a row one morning, I was just like, I need hash browns. I was also craving bacon and eggs for the first whole week on tea, which was horrible because I'm vegan. I was just like, life is awful. So it's just like a crazy, like, food rebirth. But yeah, so it's calmed down a bit now. But I enjoy food so much more than I used to, which is really nice. Which is really, really nice, and good and better and healthier for me. So yeah, that's my, like, experience of food. Was I going to say something else? Yeah, here's another thing. Let's talk about, like, this is still transy related and food related. I found 2 things to talk about that are transy related and food related. I want to talk about veganism and masculinity just briefly, because there's a sort of thing that goes with being vegan. I mean, there are lots of things that go with being vegan, with people like thinking you're unhealthy and thinking that they need to talk to you about protein, when really they probably don't pay anything into their own protein intake, and like anything else about nutrition. Like, are you suddenly a nutritionist? Shut up. Anyway, so you have that, but then also there is this sort of culture of masculinity associated with meat eating, and being a vegan guy, there's a lot of there can be a lot of sort of silliness about, oh, you're like not manly, you're like so feminine, and like, oh, save the animals and be weedy and don't have any muscles. And as it happens, I am quite sensitive and weedy and don't really have any muscles. And I don't really care, but like being vegan on top of that can sort of add to that sort of like, ugh. And I don't know, I suppose I find that a little challenging at times, maybe. I imagine other people would find it more challenging because I'm quite at peace with my femininity and weediness. But yeah, I think that's another sort of challenge you can come across, in this ridiculous idea that eating meat is like so manly, like, oh, I'm so manly eating the flesh of another animal, aren't I great? And that's, to be honest, I think it's actually quite a good thing to have to get past, because it's just another one of these ridiculous like ideas about masculinity that it's really helpful to challenge and really sort of, you know, don't get stuck in those silly ideas. They're really, really silly. Make your own kind of masculinity. You know? Anyway. Personally, I think trans guys already have a leg up in terms of, like, security in their male identity, because, I don't know, the way I used to say it when I was talking about my name, because for a while I wasn't really bothered about getting my name changed, although I'm very glad I've done it now. And one of the reasons I gave was I was like, well, if wandering around with, like, double D boobs and no penis doesn't threaten my masculinity, I don't think having a female name is going to threaten my masculinity. So, you know. Anyway, so yeah, actually, here's what I'm saying. I think that being trans has already given me a sort of leg up in that sense of, like, laughing off these ridiculous ideas about masculinity. And that sort of, like, helped in terms of being a vegan guy and not feeling that sort of, like, oh god, like, am I, like, not a proper man because I'm not, like, eating flesh. This is a shambles, I'm sorry. Oh, that exam was so bad. Have a good week. See you next time. Be good. Bye.